Stealth is an element of surprise. You don't see it until it's right in front of your face. But there are some elements of stealth that are not meant to be seen. There are things that lurk in the shadows, which are built to be invisible to radar, capable of bringing devastation anywhere they want, anytime they want. These are America's stealthiest weapons. This is the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. The United States has produced very few stealth aircrafts. There's the F-117 Nighthawk, the F-22 Raptor, the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, and of course, the B-2 Spirit. However, out of all these stealth aircrafts, the B-2 is the most mysterious, the most secretive. Some say it's the most deadly. It's so secretive that we rarely hear about it. In fact, there have only been 2 confirmed sightings of this plane in action over Iraq. But why? Why does the U.S. Air Force keep it such a secret? What makes the B-2 so special? That's what we're going to find out today. But before we get into it, if you want to see more videos about the most secretive technology in the world, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because today we go deep into the lore of the B-2 Spirit. I want you to picture this with me. It's the year 2001. The United States is at war in Afghanistan. A target has been identified high up in the mountains. It's a cave complex. Intelligence suggests that Al-Qaeda is operating from here, but getting to it is proving difficult. Roads are too treacherous for vehicles. Terrain is far too volatile for ground troops. So the Air Force calls in an ace. A single B-2 Spirit stealth bomber takes off under cover of darkness. Flying over the mountainous terrain, the B-2 Spirit uses its advanced stealth capabilities to avoid detection. Flying just below the radar horizon, it reaches its target undetected. Then it does something that no other aircraft can do: lands on a small dirt strip disguised as a mountain pass. From here, the B-2 deploys special forces behind enemy lines. With that mission accomplished, the B-2 Spirit takes off again, disappearing back into the night sky. As far as the enemy knows, it was never even there. The B-2 Spirit is one of the most unique platforms in the U.S. military arsenal. No other aircraft has its range, payload capacity, and stealth profile. But how did this strange-looking flying wing come to be? Well, to answer that question, we've got to go back to the Cold War. When North Korea shot down an American U-2 spy plane in 1960, the U.S. found itself in a bit of a problem. Up until that point, spy planes like the U-2 were the main way of gathering intel on Soviet airspace. But now the Soviets had proven that they could be taken down, so the CIA came up with a solution: create a new type of plane, one that wouldn't show up on Soviet radar. Thus began the development of the SR-71 Blackbird, a plane so fast that it couldn't be locked onto by Soviet radar. But after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the need for a super high-speed plane disappeared. However, a new threat was emerging: missiles. Missiles are cheap, easy to build, and most importantly, impossible for fighter jets to outrun. So a new project was started, one whose primary purpose was to hide, a plane that would be invisible to radar. But how do you design a plane that doesn't show up on radar? Let's think about radar for a second. Radar works by sending out electromagnetic waves to bounce off objects in the sky. The waves then return to the radar dish, where they're picked up and a map is created. So to beat radar, an aircraft needs to do one of 2 things. 1. Fly below the radar horizon, or 2. Not reflect radar waves. The first option is easy. If you fly low enough, you won't show up on radar. But the problem with that is, you'd have to fly very low, meaning you'd be much closer to the ground and much more susceptible to wind currents, not to mention how slow it would make your aircraft. So the second option is chosen. You want to build a plane that doesn't reflect radar waves. But which materials can block radar waves? Well, a material called Invar. This is a nickel-iron alloy that reduces thermal expansion, too. So it's used in applications where extreme temperatures are involved, like inside jet engines. It also happens to block radio waves, so Invar is used all throughout the B-2's airframe, which means the B-2 essentially eats radar for breakfast. However, there's another problem. An aircraft needs to be able to maneuver, which creates a third problem. How do you create a plane that can maneuver while being made of a metal that blocks radar? The answer: composite materials. Composite materials are very lightweight and offer a lot of structural strength. They're made of fiberglass, carbon fiber or Kevlar set in a plastic resin. These materials are layered and woven together to create very strong components. But more importantly, composites don't contain iron, meaning they're not naturally magnetic and will reflect much less radar than an all-metal plane. So the Northrop Grumman Corporation took these three ideas: INVAR, composite materials, and a flying wing design. Combined them together and created the B-2 Spirit. But why a flying wing? Well, a flying wing design has several advantages. First, it's extremely stealthy. Bullets, missiles, and surface-to-air systems rely on aerodynamics to lock onto targets. The flying wing's lack of distinct aerodynamic features, like a tail or fuselage, makes it very difficult to track. Second, it's very fuel efficient. All planes have to have control surfaces like ailerons and rudders, but a flying wing doesn't. That means less drag and more efficiency. Finally, it has a large internal payload bay, which means it can carry a lot of bombs, missiles, or in the case of the B-2, both. So now that we know how the B-2 works, let's take a look at why it's so mysterious. When the B-2 first flew back in 1989, it was the most advanced aircraft ever made. It flew so silently that the B-2's own radars couldn't detect it. But since then, nations around the world have been catching up. But there's a reason why nobody's managed to shoot down a B-2 yet. It's because of this thing, the B-2's counter against anti-ship missiles. We don't know exactly how it works, but it's believed that the B-2 carries small electronic warfare pods that emit a large amount of RF energy. It's confusing any missile that gets close. And to add to that, there's the B-2's ability to fly anywhere. This might seem strange considering that the B-2 has a maximum range of 8,800 kilometers, but that's when it's being flown solo. The B-2's real purpose is as a launch platform. B to South can carry up to 27 tons of ordnance, including the $30,000 GBU-32 Joint Direct Attack munition, a GPS-guided bomb that can destroy entire buildings with surgical precision. These munitions are normally dropped from 12,000 meters, but the B-2's 8,800 kilometer range means it can reach targets that are far out of range of any conventional aircraft. This effectively gives the B-2 a global strike capability. Any nation that threatens the United States is well within range of the B-2 Spirit. But who are these nations? Which countries are worried about the B-2 Spirit? Well, the first is North Korea. North Korea has tested multiple anti-ship missiles, which could potentially threaten U.S. carriers in the Pacific. If a conflict were to arise, it's likely that the B-2 would be sent in to destroy North Korean anti-ship missile sites. Another nation that fears the B-2 is Iran. Back in 2018, the U.S. dropped 20,500 kilograms bombs on an al-Qaeda training camp in Afghanistan. The raid was called Operation Gallant and was a resounding success, but it would have been a lot easier if the U.S. didn't have to fly so far. The B-2 Spirit would have cut flight times in half, meaning that pilots could have gotten more rest and the raid would have caused less wear and tear on the C-17 Globemasters. And finally, there's China. China's growing power in the Pacific has alarmed the United States. While China isn't a direct threat to the U.S. mainland, it does pose a threat to U.S. territories like Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands. Again, the B-2 would be perfect for this situation. It could strike at any time without warning, and it could icily evade any attempts from Chinese anti-ship missiles. So why does the U.S. Air Force keep the B-2 Spirit a secret? It's simple deterrence. Nations like North Korea, Iran, and China don't know that the B-2 exists. They'll be more likely to take risks, which means that the U.S. might have to use conventional aircraft instead. Keeping the B-2 Spirit a secret ensures that the U.S. has the element of surprise. It's the ultimate deterrent against any nation that dares oppose the United States. And that's the story of the most secretive weapon in the U.S. arsenal. But what do you think? Do you think that the B-2 Spirit is a good thing or a bad thing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you want to see more videos about the most secretive technology in the world, then make sure to subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.